to social fitness and investing in our connections. So the content today that we're going to talk about is based on this book, which is centered around actually the longest scientific study on happiness. And you're like, wait a minute, we're talking about social connections here, but hang on there with me. There's some pretty cool stuff in this book, much more than I could ever cover in 30 to 45 minutes. But to provide a light overview, this longitudinal study, it was based out of Harvard University. It began back in the 1930s and is continuing on through today. So that's like 85 plus years this has been going on, and strong at that. It also includes some other longitudinal studies that span across the globe. So different international research projects have kind of incorporated some of their findings in this happiness study. So we'll go ahead and get started with this, and I'll share more on this topic in that book as we go through. But these are the objectives that I hope to cover within the next half hour or so. So we're going to take a look at, just do an overview of that study. It's a landmark study. It's really some cool stuff there. We'll define what the heck am I talking about when I say social fitness. We're going to take a look at your social connections and relationships, and then consider how to improve upon those or invest and build on them and strengthen them even more. Sound good? All right. So this is what was interesting from this study. They asked millennials this same question, what they felt might make them happier. So they asked them, and their number one thing that those millennials, when those respondents were asked, said money. That was their number one thing. And number two was fame. Fame, which I thought that was kind of like, really, fame, to be famous? But you think about it, and like this generation really kind of grew up with, think of a lot of the TV shows that we had, were the instant gratification, The Voice, America's Got Talent, just like to be famous and all that glorious stuff. So I thought that was really pretty interesting. They took the same group in this study and asked those respondents the same question a decade later. Well, you might guess it came up a little bit different. A whole lot. But here's what they found from that same group. They responded and said, they didn't say money, but they said a good career, meaning financial security. So that's pretty similar, right? And then the second thing, fame completely dropped off the list, right? A decade later. But the second thing that rose to that second area for millennials was to have good times with family and friends. That rose on their relations. And then they asked that, they didn't just ask millennials, but they also asked different generations, respondents in this study. And resoundingly, they found that people preferred quality relationships, and that rose to the surface, whether it's married, if it is friendship, if it's just social connections, but those rose to the top. Does that surprise anybody? Thumbs up, no surprise. I thought that was pretty interesting. So really, as we kind of mature, so Gina, they may not have had satisfaction from receiving more money. True. So with that shared, across the board, relationships and connections did elevate, and that came, for each generation, that was an important thing for happiness in their thought. All righty. So, all right, let me dive in a little bit more and taking a look at some of these findings from that study. Specifically around social fitness. So the Harvard study resoundingly bared witness to the importance of human connection and quality relationships, and what defines making a good life, right? So with that said, a good life, you guys, isn't one that's free of worries or stress or headaches or pain. In fact, the research found that most relationships come with some degree of headaches or or pains, or you got to work for it. Think about a lot of the things that you value and really treasure in life. They weren't always handed to us, right? I mean, on a silver platter. We often kind of had to work a little couple struggles there to get there. But when you think about relationships, many of our relationships, they all have their ups and downs, don't they? But the experience of relationships gained far outweighed the pain of relationships lost, right? So what's that old saying? It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved before, right? Or never to have loved at all. So back to those poll responses that you guys shared, what would maybe make you happier or add to your happiness level? Absolutely. Our things, our toys, our stuff, money, things, boats, new cars, a home, whatever it might be. Certainly they can add to happiness. There may be some headaches with it, but overwhelmingly, the study repeatedly found that people who are more connected with family, friends in their communities are happier and actually more physically healthier, if you can believe that, than people who don't have those relationships or social connections, right? All right, so that kind of bounces us into this next section or that next objective. We're going to continue to reference that landmark study throughout the rest of the presentation, but let's take a look at this social fitness. When we're taking a look at investing in relationships and what promotes our overall well-being, it's about having the ability to engage in personal and professional relationships positively, right? So think about social fitness almost like a muscle or any other area in your life. The more you practice it or work at it or exercise at it, the stronger or the better you're going to get at it. Social fitness, if you will, or that connection with others is a key indicator to happiness or this good life, right, that the whole study talks about. So let's go ahead and bounce on a little bit and let's talk about good health and social fitness. Check this research out, because if you've got any kind of personal health goals, social connections can help, right? So out of the journal, actually out of Social Science and Mayo Clinic, found that like 65% of respondents said that they'd be more willing to stick to their health habits if they had someone to support them. And then that second bullet, that's kind of like around group activity. Over 50% of people prefer that kind of, like having somebody to go to a class with, whether it's yoga or whatever. And even if it's not a class setting, we still have close to 30% of the people that responded saying that, it's nice if you have a buddy, an exercise buddy to help you with those health, or even if it's not maybe fitness, maybe it's about a weight program. Maybe that's a fitness goal that you would have. You think of like Weight Watchers or different support groups like that. 95% of the people who participate in those types of things say that if they've got somebody that's in there with them doing it, they're more likely to succeed at their goals, right? Even beyond that, you guys, let me share this information. These studies showed where social connection also positively impacted physical health, not just goals and trying to get healthier, but physical health. So a study out of Australia found that 22%, let me share this study here, 22% of the respondents 70 plus years old who had a strong network of friends tended to live longer than their counterparts who had weaker friend connections. So, wow, a longer, healthier life would be a good thing. Here's another study on breast cancer patients. Close to 3,000 participants in this study found that women with breast cancer who had really strong network of friends were 4 times more likely to survive their diagnosis than women who didn't have friends or somebody else to kind of lean on, or to to be there for them, if you would think about that, right? So let's look a little deeper at some of these connections. Okay, so some more good news about your health and social connections. So we talked about the physical health. We got mental and emotional health, spiritual health, things like that. So when you share, when you're sharing or discussing maybe notes on anxiety or nervousness or, depression or disappointment or maybe even a pain or an ailment, but when you share that with somebody else, that sharing in and of itself doesn't make you feel quite so alone in that disappointment or pain, right? If you're able to share that with somebody else and, kind of talk through it, if you know what I mean. Now, on the flip side of that, we don't always want to be the person that's constantly unloading, our griefs and our pains and our woes to somebody else, because that can be a little daunting if you're on the other end of it, right? Anyway, anybody ever, show of hands, anybody ever see this movie called A Man Named Otto? All right, so this movie really kind of drives home this point, exactly what we're talking about. This gentleman, Tom Hanks, the main character in the movie, you know, his wife was his life, right? And then towards the end of his career, his wife had passed away, and then he's looking at retirement. So by the time he retired, his purpose, if you will, or his will to live also passed, right? So it's not like he was all sad and lonely and depressed, but he just really didn't care to live anymore. So, he just thought, well, I'm done. And so he was trying to find different ways to check out. It kind of sounds like it's a depressing movie, but it really wasn't, because as he's trying to find different ways to end his life, unbeknownst to him, he kind of gets pulled in by, a new neighborhood family that moves in his block, and asking for assistance with that, needing help with this, I need a ride here or there. He kind of gets pulled into their life, and then there's this stray cat that he ends up having to almost take over because but with this social interaction, even though he wasn't looking for it, that kind of ended up on his doorstep, he kind of found some more meaning in life, and it became more fulfilling because he started gaining some more social connections. So I just thought that movie, if you have a chance to catch it, it's touching. It really depicts what we're talking about here, how these social relationships can add value and meaning and will to live, if you will. Pun intended there. So oftentimes, with this, we see relationships or social connection as unattainable or out of reach, right? Sometimes it's just like, I don't know, I can't see where we connect. But our ability to connect, it doesn't necessarily have to be reliant on things like, oh, I'm waiting on a promotion, so that then I'm more at their level in the organization. Or maybe I'm waiting for more money, so socially I'll be able to hang with them and do things. Or you don't necessarily have to wait for vacation to kind of break out of your shell. The good life and these social connections can be right in front of you, right? Sometimes just an arm's length or even a cube away, right? And when it can oftentimes be when it's most unexpected. Here's what I want to challenge you to think about. For those of you that would like to probably reach out and maybe build upon those connections while you're here, maybe on this webinar, ask yourselves these types of, start thinking about these kind of things. Who are the people that you most enjoy and that maybe you value and work with? And what is it about these people that you do like? And are you showing appreciation to them and what it is about them that you like? All right. You might also ask yourself, who's different from me? Whether it's how you think, your background or your expertise, and what might you be able to learn from them? There's a little curious way of saying, I can learn something from so and so, right? You also might consider if you have colleagues that you're continually feel in conflict with, what is it that you might be able to do to alleviate? We're going to bounce on in and take a look at your social connections. And there's a handout here, Andrea or Kate, whomever would upload that. That would be great. I appreciate this. As someone who moved into West Virginia as an adult. Okay. It can be more difficult once people kind of get in cliques too, or kind of have their own social circle. It can be hard at times to kind of find an in, to get into those. But asking yourself some of those prior questions, and here's a couple other things. We'll take a look. We'll get there, see if some of these things might help you. But you can download the handout that Andrea or Kate, whomever uploaded that. And if you don't have time to download and open it up, just take a sheet of paper. And I want you to think about your current social connections, the connection, the people that populate your life, right? Yes, there are going to be some that come to mind quickly, like your parents or your partners or your best friends. But I also want to challenge you to think not just of the social successful connections, but consider your day-to-day interactions, good or bad. Like maybe it's a neighbor or a coworker or bosses or relationships that might seem insignificant. List them, put them on that handout, or make a list on a sheet of paper there in front of you. Think of those people. Who are they? Who are the people in your life? That's a good place to start. Even if it's the mailman, maybe you get a nice rapport going with I don't know who those are, but you do. And then once you've done that, if you've opened up the handout, you'll see that. But if not, I want you to think about the quality and character of those relationships. Are they energizing or are they depleting? Do they kind of drain you, right? So kind of what do they bring to the table for you energetically? Do they charge you up, or do they kind of, those relationships suck you dry? Are they people that you see frequently, or are they people that you see infrequently? And then once you think about those, I want you to, although this is a simple two-dimensional chart here, I'm going to challenge you to put those people on a chart, right? Where do they fit on that spectrum, right? So for example, I'll walk through a couple examples here. My mother, totally infrequently do I see her, so she's pretty far to the left, but she's pretty high up on the top of that chart, energizing when I do get to be around her. And I got another friend, her name's Dana, right? So she is energizing, right? A little frequent, but maybe not as frequent as a lot. Then I've got a neighbor, put Mike on there. So I want you to plot your people on this chart, right? Where are they falling on this chart for you? Right? So example there, I've got a guy named Tim. It's fake. I don't have a colleague named Tim that I find depleting, and I see him day in, day out. But once you can plot them on that chart, what I want you to think about is, what direction would you like to move them in? If you could nudge them a little bit. And from there, put a little arrow towards where you'd like to move them, right? Maybe some of them are exactly where they need to be. Right? But what do you need to do to kind of edge them around? Okay, those are your connections. So keep this little table in mind, and let's kind of move on into this next objective. And how are we going to build upon those? How are we going to improve upon these social connections? All right. So we're going to invest in that connection. You got your little plotted out chart there. Some of the easiest way is to start with, those that we already have in place. So focus on those relationships that are working well for you, right? Because a lot of times what happens is we start to take those relationships for granted because they're working well. We don't need to be sure that we're carving out more time. Of course, they're always going to be there. But is that going to keep them rich? So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is, are those relationships energizing? And if so, if they're over and not frequently categories, scooch them over a little bit. Try to carve out some more time to where you can spend time with those energizing relationships, if that makes sense. And then if you look at the ones, if you have some of those relationships that kind of fall on that depleting end of the spectrum, think about, are there steps that you can take, number one, to improve those relationships, and asking yourself, have I been fair? What's that? Why do they drain me? Is it something that I've assumed, something that I've done? And if not, if you can't put a positive light on that relationship, try to find ways that you can move them over to the left so that maybe you don't have to spend as much frequently, as much time with them if you don't have to, because that's kind of building some boundaries around yourself, which can be healthy for us. You got those same people that just, chip away at you. That can wear you down, can it? All right. So here's some keys. These are some relationship keys that came right out of this Good Life study out of Harvard. These are 7 different types of relationships that, wow, it'd be great if we had people in each of these categories. They're like keystones, right? That lead to and have are part of healthy relationships. So let's dive into these a little bit. This is another handout that you can upload if you haven't done that already, ladies. Thank you for doing that. It's nice to have and kind of keep these things in mind. So the first one is safety and security, right? And this is somebody that you would call upon if you woke in the middle of the night and something was going on, if there was a fire or something happened, or, who is it that you would turn to in a moment of crisis? That's your safety and security kind of relationship. Here's another relationship. Do you have somebody in your life that encourages you to do new things, challenges you to take changes, maybe pursue your goals? And if so, who's that? Who are those people that are your learning and growth relationships? This emotional closeness, that keystone type of relationship, that's somebody who pretty much knows most things about you. That if you're feeling down, somebody you can kind of lean on. Could be maybe a sibling or somebody you've just known for, a while, that you feel very comfortable with, that is a good emotional support, for you. If you've ever been in any kind of group, that they've just been there for you. Then you've got this identity and affirmation type of, these are the relationships that maybe go way back, college buddies, neighborhood people, people that just know you inside and out, the good, the bad, the ugly. These are the people that you've got history with. And so those are good relationships also to have, to kind of lean on. Then you got your romantic, that intimacy is good to have. You have those kind of relationships. Hopefully not a couple at the same time, but romantic intimacy is also important in relationships. The informational and practical relationship, those are the people that can kind of help you out in a bind, right? You got a critical situation going on, and you know that they can help you, or they've got maybe expertise in that area. I shared an example the other day. I've got a neighbor that's just always just solid as a rock, and I had a bird must have come down the chimney in the house, freaked me out. But my husband was out of town and picked up that phone, and I called Mike, and I'll be a son of a gun. He was there in a minute. Help me get that daggone bird out of the house. So, those are the people, those are the relationships that would fall into that keystone category. And then the fun, relaxed, these are your besties, right? The people that you just feel comfortable leaning on. You might take a road trip, take your vacations with, but these are all keystone types of relationships, good ones to have, to kind of hang on to, right? So now that we've already kind of identified some of our current relationships and some good characteristics and types of relationships, there's one final handout I want you to download. And if you didn't download it, you can just grab a sheet of paper, but make some columns, right? And in that far left-hand column, you make a list of those people and put them down in that individual relationship. And then you can see at the top of that handout, you've got those 7 keystones, right? These are keystone supports. And so what you would do is, to the right, you put a little X in those columns to help you identify what are the supports that those people in that left-hand column that you interact with day in, day out, or even, on a long, maybe it's spread out. You only see them every 6 months. But what keystones do those relationships fill for you? And put an X there. I mean, some people may fill a lot of those keystones for you, right? And so once you're able to do that, I'll pause for a moment and give you some time to think about that. You may find yourself surprised because you may think your bestie would fill all those, but once you really start to think about it, it's like, wow. Or you may have somebody that just is filling all those boxes. Not that friendships are about keeping score or tallying up what they can do for me, because what I want you to do now, after you've added, some thought to where those relationships fit for you, I want you to think about where you fit for them. Flip that over on the reverse side of that. I want you to put a circle in the box. If you think from your perspective that you fill that keystone for those people on the left-hand side. So the X is what they do for you. The O is what you're doing for them. Because we know that it is important to reciprocate, support in relationship. One thing to keep in mind regarding relationship, the best ones are those that are balanced in the give and take, right? So relationships aren't about keeping score. I get that, but it just causes you to pause this little activity and think about it. Hey, so-and-so does all this stuff for me, and man, I can't remember the last time I was there for them, right? So think about it. If you are in a relationship that is all take, or give, what's going to happen? It's tough to always be the one that's giving. So balancing that out a little bit. So one way that we can continue to cultivate our relationship and build our social fitness, remember, because it continually takes work to keep them there, is by trying to reciprocate and be this for somebody else, right? Particularly those positive relationships that we want to enter, we want to be energizing to them. So hopefully this was a cool little thing. If you haven't downloaded those handouts, you may not have time because we're about ready to wrap this up, but you could do this on your own time and figure this out and give it some thought. These are ways to build upon your social fitness, all right? So as we wrap this up, I want you to consider your social connections. Make that list. Who are the people that are in your life regularly, even if they don't live in, you don't see them but every 6 months or every 2 years? Who are those people that are super important to you? And are we being generous with our time with those people that we want to cultivate? And are we any keystones for them in those relationships? Be curious. Ask yourself these questions. Am I holding us back? Am I trying to not jump in and build these, right? Remember, we had those little questions there, things that we might want to think about. Why are we not trying to reach out and build these social connections? And then employ those keystones that we just talked about. These are some tips, to help you get there, right? And build upon those social connections and fitness. So that pretty much, wraps up this first session of our summer series. And I hope there was some good meat in there. I enjoyed spending some time with you this afternoon. I hope there were some good pointers for you, or good tips or refreshers. And till then, stay happy and live a good life. Take care.